Welcome back to the Florida Aviation Professionals Academy computer-based trainings. These CBTs will continue with an overview of Fdot inspections and overall program management. In the short 3 years since FAPA's inception, the topics covered in this CBT have consistently been topics that have generated the most questions and discussion. It is the hope that this CBT will provide a baseline of information before we meet in person. This training will take a deeper dive into airport inspections, including standards for licensing of airports in the state of Florida. If you work at or with an airport, you are already aware of how important this topic is and how it impacts your day-to-day work activity. This training also provides an overview of the Fdot work program. We know that navigating Fdot work program requirements can be a challenge, so it is our goal to provide you with an understanding of how the program works. Did you know that in addition to the Aviation grant program, there are also other state funding sources that can benefit your airport? For instance, today we are at Quincy Municipal Airport located in Gadsden County. Gadsden County is just one of the 32 rural counties designated as a rural area of opportunity, which can receive economic benefits from state programs that positively impact the airport. This CBT will provide a brief overview of a few of these programs. We hope that you enjoy this overview.
The first component of this CBT is related to Fdot airport inspections and requirements, as well as airfield standards for licensure. We'll then follow by providing an overview of the Fdot work program, its allocations, timeline, as well as an introduction to the Joint Automated Capital Improvement Program, or JCIP. Aviation-specific funding sources will also be covered, including the Aviation grant program, as well as other funding sources available to airports across the state. Before beginning this module, please enjoy this brief video that covers some of the ways in which Fdot works with airports across the state.
You may know that Fdot's Aviation Office partners with more than 686 airports throughout the state. But did you know that also includes other aircraft facilities such as heliports and seaplane bases? Helicopters are distinct because of their versatile ability to take off and land just about anywhere. In Florida, helicopters may only take off and land at licensed and registered airports, which Fdot regulates to ensure safety. Not only do Florida's 129 public use and 529 private use airports grant authorization for the landing and taking off of these aircrafts, but 166 Florida hospitals, like this one, also operate dedicated airports. Heliports require an airport site approval order in order to establish a new airport or a heliport. Fdot's Aviation Office is Florida's resource for establishing a new heliport within the state. Another unique aircraft you may see while in Florida is the Seaplane. Florida is home to 51 private use seaplane bases and 7 public use seaplane bases, including Miami Seaplane Base, and has more seaplane pilots than any other state. Opportunities to fly seaplanes exist in numerous places in Florida, from the Florida Keys to the inland lakes of Central Florida to the Florida Panhandle. Seaplanes are used throughout the state for various reasons, including traveling to remote locations, search and rescue missions, and wildfire relief efforts by firefighters. Fdot provides approval, inspection, and licensing for all public use seaplane bases to ensure safety. The location where seaplanes may land is regulated through coordination with the local zoning and the Federal Aviation Administration. It is recommended that seaplane pilots check the Florida Fish and Wildlife and Conservation Commission website for the many marine mammal protection zones throughout the state and observe and follow speed regulations. Doing so will help keep Florida a seaplane-friendly state. Florida's aviation industry is just one section of our state's diverse transportation system, and Fdot's Aviation Office is proud to serve Florida's residents and visitors.
Inspection requirements and licensing standards are covered by Chapter 330 of the Florida Statutes, as well as Chapter 14-60 of the Florida Administrative Code. At the highest level, Fdot issues a license after a final airport inspection finds the facility to be in compliance with all of the requirements for that license. Fdot may conditionally license an airport that does not meet standards only if it determines that such exception is justified by unusual circumstances and does not endanger public safety. Each public airport license is good for 1 year after the effective date of the license. The expiration date of a license may be adjusted to provide a maximum license period of 18 months if needed to facilitate inspection schedules, recognize seasonal airport operations, or improve administrative efficiencies. Airfield standards for airport licensing are provided in Rule 14-60.007 of the Florida Administrative Code. These minimum airfield standards support Florida statutes and apply to all airports licensed by the state of Florida. At the highest level, these standards aim to increase safety, eliminate hazards, standardize airport marking and lighting, and provide obstruction standards. Within 14-60.007, there are 10 primary categories of standards for airport licenses. The first is related to minimum landing area dimensions, which includes provisions for minimum runway lengths and widths depending on the landing area type, including ultralight fields, seaplane bases, and helipads. The second, landing and surface areas for licensed airports, is generally aligned with Part 77 surfaces for airspace protection and includes provisions for the primary surface, approach surfaces, as well as transitional surfaces. In instances where the approach surface has obstructions, the third section, Thresholds and Displaced Thresholds for Licensed Airports, provides the requirements for citing thresholds based upon obstructions that cannot be removed or mitigated. The fourth section, Vertical Approach Clearance for Licensed Airports, relates to minimum vertical clearance over objects that are required when an approach crosses either a road, railroad, traverseway, or waterway. Runway safety areas are defined surfaces around runways designed to provide additional measures of safety for aircraft overrun. Minimum dimensional standards for runway safety areas are provided based on the runway type. Runway pavement standards for licensed airports includes provisions for the pavement condition index scores of runways. There are a range of 7 categories ranging from excellent to failed that allow for a wide range of PCI values to be determined for an airport. Though a runway PCI value of 10 or below is considered by FDOT to not meet the acceptable licensed airport standards. Airfield improvements for licensed airports is the 7th major category within 14-60.007. This section provides 6 standards that all licensed airports in the state must comply with in order to receive their license. Examples include the provision of a windsock, at least 2 fire extinguishers, and an operable public telephone. Section 8, Additional Responsibilities for Licensed Airports, includes 5 provisions that must be met by all airports. One example is that obstructions must be marked and/or lighted in accordance with Rule 14-60.009. The final 2 sections relate to airport marking as well as airport lighting. Airport marking provides provisions for runway designation markings, runway centerline markings, threshold bars, arrows and arrowheads, holding positions, as well as other standard airport marking features. Similarly, airport lighting provides standard provisions for runway edge lights, threshold and runway end lights, displaced threshold lights, as well as taxiway edge lights. The FDOT Work Program is the engine that moves transportation projects forward in the state of Florida. The FDOT Work Program was established through Florida statutes and includes legislative procedures for the preparation, adoption, execution, and amendments to the FDOT Work Program. The FDOT Work Program is funded through funds received in the State Transportation Trust Fund, otherwise known as the STTF, which is the vehicle that receives and allocates all transportation tax revenues. Statute dictates that FDOT shall spend the money in the STTF in accordance with its annual budget. The use of this funding has restrictions, but for the purposes of this CBT, our discussion will be primarily focused on the funding used for public transportation projects, as well as projects in Florida's strategic intermodal system. To provide an overview, we are providing this video developed by FDOT District 1, which highlights the work program.
Projects in the work program include our highways, bridges, air and seaports, railways, transit, multi-use trails, sidewalks, and bicycle facilities. As such, the work program covers all project phases until delivery to the public: project development and environment study, design, right-of-way, and finally, construction. The work program also has funding for maintenance and operations of our transportation system at levels our residents, businesses, and visitors are accustomed to and expect. The work program offers stability. First, it is financially balanced. The funding for future projects in the work program comes from forecasts for federal, state, and local sources such as taxes, fees, and tolls. Funds are then allocated to each of FDOT's 7 districts per legislative requirements based on population, funds collected, safety and needs assessments, and the priorities set forth by our local partners. Second, the program is stable as it funds projects through their full life cycle from planning to construction and finally maintenance. The work program process is complete upon the Florida's legislature approval of the tentative work program in the spring and adoption by the State Secretary of Transportation by July 1st, which is the first day of the fiscal year.
Funding for the State Transportation Trust Fund comes from a variety of sources, including vehicle use taxes, aviation fuel taxes, fuel sales taxes, motor vehicle license-based fee, vehicle title fee, rental car surcharges, and vehicle registration. All of these funding sources are pooled together in the State Transportation Trust Fund for use on transportation projects across the state. Once all of this funding is received into the STTF, FDOT allocates estimated revenue over a 5-year period to various programs in each year. Based on Florida statute, the Office of the Work Program allocates funding to different offices and programs within FDOT. A minimum rate of 15% of the State Transportation Trust Fund revenue is given to the Office of Freight Logistics and Passenger Operations, where the Aviation Office is found. The Office of Freight Logistics and Passenger Operations then allocates this funding to each of the modal offices in its purview. Once the Aviation Office has received its allocation, it then estimates and provides funding to the individual district offices. Once received, district offices use this allocation to develop the department's 5-year work program, and funding is allocated for future airport projects for up to 6 years in advance. Within the aviation program, state law defines 3 primary aviation grant funding categories: the Airport or Aviation Development Program, the Discretionary Capacity Improvement Program, and the third, the Strategic Intermodal System, which is a major source of funding specifically for capacity projects at SIS-designated airports. Money across the 3 primary funding mechanisms provides upwards of $300 million annually for airport and aviation projects across the state. As shown, the lion's share of this funding comes from the Standard Aviation Development Program at a rate of about 2/3 throughout the planned work program years. The second largest amount of funding comes from the SIS, with the third being the discretionary capacity, which is available to just 7 airports in the state. FDOT district funding allocations are determined by the central office. In order to determine the amount of funding that each district gets for aviation projects, a formula that takes into account commercial service emplanements, projected 20-year growth and emplanements, based aircraft, projected 20-year growth in based aircraft, as well as projected 20-year growth in population, is utilized to determine how much aviation funding each district receives. In order to receive funding at an individual airport through the work program, airports develop an individual capital improvement program as part of their airport master plan. Projects identified for the airport planning horizon are then programmed into JSIP, the Joint Automated Capital Improvement Program, which is Florida's aviation-specific capital improvement program software. Projects programmed in JSIP are reviewed by FDOT district aviation staff and then sent to FDOT district work program offices for programming. This information is used to develop the tentative work program, which is ultimately refined into the adopted work program. The first 5 years of the project in JSIP should strongly correlate to those found in the FDOT work program. A more comprehensive overview of JSIP will be provided as part of the in-person FAPA course, but at the highest level, JSIP is a compilation of proposed projects for each airport in the state system that are open for public use and owned by a public entity. It is also a communication tool between an airport, their district office, central office, as well as the FAA for what projects, priorities, and funding levels will be required at an individual airport level. The JSIP for each airport is located within the Florida Aviation Database, or FAD. Each FDOT district operates their work program schedule and JSIP requirements in different ways. For more detailed information on JSIP, the FDOT work program, and aviation funding opportunities through the Aviation Grant Program, please coordinate with your district aviation representative. In addition to the Aviation Grant Program funding, there are a variety of other funding tools and mechanisms available to Florida's airports to fund projects. Each of these opportunities is discussed in detail in the FDOT Project Handbook, which can be found on the FDOT Aviation website. The State Infrastructure Bank, or SIB, is a revolving loan and credit program consisting of two separate accounts to improve project feasibility. The SIB can provide loans and other assistance to public or private entities for eligible projects. Please note that this funding is a loan and is not provided in the form of a grant. There are selection criteria that are applicable, but in general, projects must display a direct link with mobility and economic growth. An example of a SIB-funded project is the Intermodal Center at Miami International Airport. In addition to the SIB, there is also the Economic Development Transportation Fund, or EDTF. This is an incentive program created to alleviate transportation problems that adversely affect the decision of a specific company to locate, expand, or remain in the state of Florida. The program requires FDOT to enter into contracts with governmental entities for the development of publicly accessible transportation facilities needed to induce a specific company to locate, expand, or remain in the state. Examples of an eligible project include, but are not limited to, safety and capacity improvements to existing roadways, the development of new roadways and rail spurs, and certain airport infrastructure improvements. The Rural Economic Development Initiative, or READY program, provides financial assistance to certain rural counties and communities across the state. Counties and communities that meet certain statutory criteria may request a waiver or reduction of the local match requirements for FDOT funding. It should be noted that this waiver or reduction in local match requirements only relates to FDOT funding. Matches are still required from funding received from FAA. An example of a READY program project is a recent hangar development at Quincy Municipal Airport. Through this program, the airport was eligible to receive 100% grant funding to complete the project. Next up is the Transportation Regional Incentive Program, or TRIP. The TRIP program was created to encourage regional planning by providing state matching funds for improvements to regionally significant transportation facilities identified and prioritized by regional partners. The TRIP is funded through documentary stamp taxes in accordance with Chapter 201 of the Florida statutes. SAFE funds, or Secure Airports for Florida's Economy, support security-related aviation projects as defined in Chapter 332 in Florida statutes, and provides training for airport security and management. This program receives funds from the United We Stand Florida license plate. It is appropriated to FDOT through Chapter 320 of the Florida statutes. Recently, FDOT used this funding to complete statewide security assessments for all Florida's general aviation airports. We'll conclude this CBT with an overview of the Strategic Intermodal System, which is a network of high-priority transportation facilities located across the state. To provide this overview, we're going to play a video developed by FDOT's central office that highlights the overarching strategic intermodal system with the inclusion of airports and spaceports within it.
When it comes to moving people and freight, the Florida Department of Transportation Strategic Intermodal System, or SIS, provides the most efficient and safest transportation facilities available. The SIS is a high-priority, high-demand network that aligns Florida's highways, airports, seaports, spaceports, railways, waterways, and transit systems. The SIS is a central nervous system that links hubs, corridors, and connectors for an extremely complex yet predictable and efficient delivery system. Hubs send and receive people and goods such as an airport or a rail terminal. corridors are highways, railways, and waterways that carry people and goods within Florida and to other states and countries. Connectors are first and last legs of trips that connect hubs to corridors. Integrating transportation into a seamless network enhances all facets of the economy and quality of life in Florida. In fact, for every $1 invested into current and emerging SIS facilities, the state experiences $5 in economic benefit. Funding for SIS projects is provided through the State Transportation Trust Fund and additional sources such as federal, regional, and local public and private partners. In the past 10 years, over $12.5 billion has been invested in the SIS to enhance economic competitiveness, provide improvements, and ensure sound stewardship of the environment. Studies are currently underway for direct connections to Orlando International Airport. Florida is a perfectly positioned freight hub for Latin America and the Caribbean. In addition, Orlando, Miami, and Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airports rank among the top 25 passenger airports in the nation. Here is just one of the aviation improvements underway. The runway expansion at Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport is designed to meet current and future demand by extending, widening, and elevating a runway in addition to constructing a bridge over the railroad and US 1. The site also features an intermodal hub. Fdot and Space Florida are pioneers in commercial space transport, and while the industry is still in its infancy, Florida's experience and unique location are unmatched. One of few launch facilities in the country, improvements to Cape Canaveral meet intermodal requirements and include enhancements to areas such as commercial spacecraft processing, launch vehicle storage, horizontal launch processing capabilities, booster recovery, and more. The strategic intermodal system is a large and complex network, but ultimately its objective is simple: to enhance Florida's economic competitiveness and quality of life by ensuring the efficient movement of both people and freight within Florida, to the United States, and to the world.
Thank you for reviewing the computer-based trainings for the Florida Aviation Professionals Academy course. We hope you enjoyed this introduction to FDOT and the Florida Aviation System. We look forward to seeing you at the in-person Fall FAPA course, held on November 17 and 18 at the Tallahassee International Airport. If you are unable to attend the fall course, we will be holding the next course in the spring, at a location to be determined. Thanks again, and see you soon.